We are in conversation with Manish Sabharwal, and ahead of the budget, we're talking about the one important topic which perhaps the solutions of go beyond the budget, it goes beyond the remit of the central government, but definitely is something that everyone's talking about and all policymakers know they need to address. It's jobs. So another example, Mr. Sabharwal, of the desperation to appease the jobs issue in the electorate, to tell voters, no, I'm doing something about it, is how this red flag of privatization, of reservation in the private sector keeps popping up. We saw the latest example in Karnataka. They first mandated 100% reservation for locals, reduced it to 50 to 70%. After the backlash, dropped it altogether for now. But there are other states who've done it. My question is that why the attempt to keep bringing back reservation, and it has its own merits, I'm not saying it doesn't, in the private sector?
I mean, nobody disagrees that India is not equal. I think depending on you choosing your parents wisely, depending on choosing which state you're born, depending on choosing which city you're born, your prospects of life are very different. The infrastructure of opportunity, which in my mind is the 3 E's of education, employment, and employability, have not been seen by politicians traditionally because they feel it's very hard to create jobs, it's very hard to fix government schools, it's very hard to get employers to take apprenticeships. But I think this idea of reservations is complex, even politically, because while it does create constituencies and remove some injustices, you can't discriminate in favor of somebody without discriminating against somebody else. So I do think that, back to my Diet Coke, there are no taste without the calories. If we really want to address the concerns of kids, I mean, maybe in 6 months or 1 year, you can get some political brownie points for some reservations. And this has traditionally been in government, but the government no longer has the fiscal space to create jobs. Public debt is now 90, it was 90%, it's down to about 85% of GDP. So I think that state governments have run out of fiscal space to change anything in their budget. In fact, 80-90% of their budget is now confiscated by salaries, pensions, and interest. So I think state governments are lashing out at or trying different things. I think private sector reservations may be killing the goose that lays the eggs. Bangalore became a verb in Silicon Valley. I've seen people with T-shirts saying I was Bangalored because their job went to Bangalore. So Karnataka obviously has attracted jobs from all over the world. I think, but Karnataka's strength has been in listening, in taking feedback, in being more open. It's probably the most, Bangalore is the only city in India where more than 60 languages are spoken, or it's the city where most languages are spoken. So I think sense has prevailed in terms of reviewing whether that kind of intervention will harm Bangalore and Karnataka more than it helps. But the underlying issue, we don't live in an economy, we live in a society, and India has to create more non-farm high-wage jobs at a higher rate than we have created. This is a different problem than creating jobs. You have to raise the productivity of sectors. My parents live in UP. Karnataka and UP have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people, so they're 4 times more productive. If you think of sectors, IT is only 0.8% of India's GDP, but it generates 8% of GDP. 0.8% of India's labor force generates 8% of GDP. Agriculture is 42% of the labor force, only generates 14% of GDP. So we need to move to high productivity sectors, which is moving people off farms to factories and to sales jobs. Sales, customer service, and logistics are the fastest growing jobs in India right now. And also different firms. The World Bank had done an exercise where they ranked India's manufacturing companies by size. There was a 24 times difference between the biggest and smallest firms. Now, if there's a 24 times difference, you can't pay the wage premium. But if you don't pay the wage premium, you're never productive. So we need states to compete. We need sectors to compete.
Mr. Sabharwal, let me just understand from the employer's point of view, because we saw a very quick and strong backlash from a NASSCOM, from industry. Everyone spoke out, and to the credit of the Karnataka government, they realized quickly enough this is not going to go down, and they withdrew for now. What really is the concern? And it seems apparent, but I want you to elaborate on it. If you ask people to mandate a 50% reservation for any one cohort, in this case locals, in management, for example, or 80% overall, what is the real concern that companies have?
Well, it's like why Ranji Trophy wasn't as good for Indian cricket as IPL. It's why OTT has made movies more meritocratic than Bollywood traditionally was. It's why private equity has made Indian business and startups more meritocratic than traditional business. I think, productivity, which we talked about at states, firms, and individuals, depends on them being meritocracies. You make decisions based on what gets you to the most productivity. I think a modern state is a welfare state. So Karnataka, the state government in Karnataka and the union government should spend money on helping people who have not had opportunities through a welfare spending. Nobody disputes a modern state is a welfare state, but I think the welfare state should be financed by taxes through productive employers. Productive employers depend on being a meritocracy. So any sort of distortions of meritocracy, at least in private sector, if they had been imposed on the software sector, then we wouldn't have exported more software than Saudi Arabia did oil. We wouldn't be exporting, we wouldn't become the pharmacy to the world by exporting $50 billion with having a $50 billion pharma industry. So I think that we have recognized the license Raj, which we tried from 1947 to almost 1991, distorted and made private employers make decisions not based on what was the right thing to do, but what the law prescribed. And that didn't exactly deliver the prosperity we sought. So since we have now recognized that mass prosperity is important and private sector employers can pay taxes and help you deliver that, GST is up. I mean, India's tax to GDP ratio at 18% is the highest it's ever been since independence. And that is a child of the growth of private sector and taxes. So I think that if we want to be good ancestors, we will not finance our welfare state by debt or by regulatory fatwas, but we will finance it by high productivity employers who pay high wages.
Absolutely. Don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. I think that's the big line to take away from this conversation. Thank you so much, Manish Sabharwal. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And we'll see you back on Budget Day to get your analysis after the announcements have been made.